Global Technology again. Thank you so much for subscribing my channel and listen this podcast. Today I have a very special guest here. We're gonna talk about AI and Copilot. And his name is Mr. Shervin Shaffie. Hopefully I say right, Shervin.
Yeah,
Forgive me.
no, perfect. That's great.
And yeah, and today is gonna be very interesting topic, and then I do want to be part of us and very informal conversation for you can learn about technology and not only in a formal way. That's the Aline Global Technology it's about as well. But before we start here, I would like to make a small introduction, short introduction here to my guest. And his name, like I said, is Mr. Shervy. And he has been working for large corporations, has a technical, using his technical skills. Um, has example Cisco. He worked for 15 years for this company, and now he works for Microsoft. And he's now speaking from California, and I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee. And he has been working for them for almost over than 5 years already. He also has 67,000 subscribers on YouTube. With the channel is called Collaboration Simplify, where he teach you how to use the Copilot to for your business or for your private. There he has so much tips that you can learn. It's very interesting channel that you can also communicate and leave your comments there. All his info is going to be displayed on this podcast as well. And I hope you enjoy it with us here, this conversation. And let's start it and dive in here in our questions. Thank you so much for this partnership and collaboration with Aline Global Technology, Mr. Shaffie. I do appreciate it, your time. And we have been connecting over than 3 years, I think, over than 3 years.
Yeah,
And I'm so glad that you're giving your trust to me. And now with my podcast, I really, really do appreciate it that.
of course. Yeah.
But Leah, let's start talking about the difference between Copilot and AI. And the reason I ask this first question is because most of my subscriber they cannot be on the tech industry yet, or they can be a final consumer, but they are Microsoft clients on their home, on their private, personal things, not only in the business. That's why I want to for them to understand how the difference between Copilot and AI.
Okay. Yeah, no, Alini, thank you very much, first of all, for having me on your show. It's a pleasure, and you're absolutely right. We've been connected for several years. It's great to be working with you. So yes, I'll try to kind of answer that question on the AI side and also Microsoft's implementation of it, which we call Copilot. And what's interesting is maybe about 2, 3 years ago, the first introduction that many people had to AI was ChatGPT. And it was a big event. Everyone got super excited. And then we started all learning about large language models, LLMs. And what Microsoft ended up doing, if you remember 2, 3 years ago, was establish a partnership with the creator of ChatGPT, which is OpenAI. And we, to this day, we use their large language model. We have an instance of their large language model that we secure with all the Microsoft parameters to ensure that your data is safe, that we're not learning from your prompts. And we call that Enterprise Data Protection, EDP.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you know your data and everything is safe is that there's a green shield on the top right-hand side of our application. The application is called Microsoft 365 Copilot. You can get to it from a website, or you can get to it from your Windows or your Macintosh or even your mobile device. And so we basically use the large language model of OpenAI, the same thing that
Mhm.
you use in ChatGPT, except a lot more security. And then what's happened, and we can talk about this more, is that Microsoft is starting to open this up to a concept called an open model, which means that not only are you able to access OpenAI's large language model, but also Anthropic's models. So there's a lot of talk about Anthropic's cloud implementation, their models, Opus 4.6, Sonnet 4.6, and all these cool things. Google has them. Perplexity has large language models. So many companies, right? So Microsoft is starting to shift to this model where we're not locked in just to ChatGPT and OpenAI, but other models that are starting to come. So I'll stop there. I know I've said a lot, but again, it's a pleasure being on your call.
I appreciate it. Not at all. I think we're learning here, and people needs to hear more technical skills that you know because your experience. Um, is so much to learn. I don't think it has a problem at all. That's why we're here for. Now we're talking about. I heard you're saying about privacy, right? I think it is the most the users that trying to use any AI brand, right? I would say um, privacy is the number one concern when do you using those tools on a daily base, right? And especially in South America market, specifically in Brazil, which is the law, the data privacy law, really, really is trying to work with business. Um, it's a little bit different than GDPR, um, but users and companies they also wants making sure they not have a lot of have to deal with the legal cost when you talk about that in case something is impacted because of the while the user or companies are using those tools. What we have to say about that when they're choosing not only coming from Microsoft, but they make decision, the decision makers, for example, in the corporations, to implement and Copilot. Um, Not only the big corporations, but also the final user as well, how they can feel secure their data and everything it's displayed there is not going to be compromised.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So if you kind of break down all the ways that you're sharing data with the AIs that you might be working with, first it's the prompt that you type in, right? So you type in a bunch of sentences and you're asking it something.
Mhm.
So there's the prompt, and that prompt has a lot of potentially personal or confidential or company information in it. The next thing that's usually in the prompt is maybe you click the plus sign and you attach a file. And that file can either be a link to somewhere, or maybe it's not even a file, maybe it's just a web link. And in work, it could be like a SharePoint document, a OneDrive. This is kind of like Microsoft's ecosystem, or you can just attach a file from your hard drive, right?
Mhm.
So you're sharing files, you're sharing links, you're typing in your prompt, and and maybe there's other elements too, but those are like the main ones. And so right there, we have like explicit language in our enterprise data protection and security and privacy documentation online that we can drop the link publicly as well, that talks about how Microsoft doesn't learn from your prompt. We don't update the large language models with your documentation, your prompts. All of that is secure and it's only yours. And there's a concept called the service boundary for each tenant. So every customer, no matter how big or small you are, you could be a 10-person company or you could be a 100,000 employee company. When you purchase a Microsoft enterprise agreement, you have a what we call a tenant, and your tenant lives in our Azure data centers, which are scattered around the world. And
Mhm.
that tenant is basically got consider like a virtual fence around it that ensures that your data just stays inside there. Even though like our services are shared and our servers and our computers and everything is like shared amongst our customers, there are like guardrails around your data from a
Mm-hmm.
tenant perspective, also from an AI perspective. So those are kind of like the components of it. And the other thing I'll say is that we also have documentation that talks about copyright protection. So if you're using our AI and you get into like a lawsuit or some legal battle where someone's like, oh, this is actually mine and you shouldn't have used it, or you should have given me credit, or I want money from you, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft has copyright protection so that if you're using Copilot and you get into a situation like that, we'll be able to back you up with our products. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't have all the details between,
Mm-hmm.
like all
Yeah.
exactly when it's supported, but I know that exists as well as another benefit. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good to know. I have no idea about that, that Microsoft has our back in
Yeah,
case we got into law issues. It's very interesting to be opening and learn more about that. Next time we're going to discuss about that. And of course, it has to be a lawyer conversation and see how this is going to be play out in
yeah,
each region, right?
right.
Because the same thing is not applicable in South America, will not be applicable in Middle Eastern either, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, how Copilot could be helping my company increase productive, um, not only in the productivity but also in sales. Can you give him a little bit tips about that? How this is gonna could be helpful to the company for those decision maker decide to sign up with Copilot, Microsoft Copilot.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, this is kind of a conversation that I have with customers all the time of different sizes. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of them are actually global as well. The way I look at it first is that there's like the individual or personal productivity. So if Shervin is using Copilot, if Aline is using Copilot, if all these people are individually using Copilot, how can you gain productivity using Microsoft's AI, the Copilot product? And there's a lot of different ways, right? So much in the same way that you're using consumer grade AI every day yourself, like I use it to plan trips. Consumer AI, I use to plan trips. I use it when I ask questions, like researching some product. I'm into mountain biking a lot, so I'm always asking you questions. How do I fix my mountain bike? So that's the stuff that I do on the consumer side. But much in the same way on the business side, you're able to use it to help you with your Excel document, right? So for me, I'm not a big Excel guy. I never took the time to learn all the formulas and the expressions and how to create graphs,
Yes, yes.
you know?
Me either. Me
So,
either. Yeah.
yeah, so when we came out with this thing called agent mode, which we now call edit with Copilot. By the way, if you don't know, Microsoft loves to change names, right? So every few months we change the name. Right. So we
It's
changed
hard to keep it tracking. Oh my goodness.
it is. It's hard for me to keep
How
track.
how you do that? How you keep all
I
this
don't know.
change? Oh my
I
gosh.
don't know. Yeah, exactly.
The good thing is that make funny of the situation. We're not gonna, if we will keep all these names, we're never gonna have Alzheimer problem in the future.
Exactly. You don't need to solve Sudoku puzzles. You just need to keep up with Microsoft names. So
Exactly. Thanks,
so
Microsoft.
So yeah, that's one of the side benefits of, like we make sure that you have mental health and brain health by focusing on just changing names. So anyways, this agent mode or edit with Copilot, it lives inside Word. PowerPoint is coming. PowerPoint, it's almost there, and then in Excel. And so you don't need to know all the formatting parameters of Word documents or how to create a chart or a pie chart or a bar chart and all these different metrics inside Excel. You just ask Copilot. Say, hey, Copilot. analyze my data, look at this 1,000 row Excel spreadsheet, give me some insights. It does Python coding for you. It looks at relationships between different columns in the spreadsheet. It creates a
Mm-hmm.
chart for you. So it does all this cool stuff. And so right there, that's a huge personal productivity because it would take me so long before AI to be able to do that inside a document or inside a
Right.
spreadsheet.
Right.
So that's like the personal productivity side, and there's a ton right there, right? Summarize my emails, tell me what I should work on, look at my team's messages, all that kind of stuff. But then there's like the agents and the agentic side. And even there, like there's different layers, right? Like there's like chatbot agents that somebody creates and shares with you, or you create and you chat with the agent. You're like, hey, like agent that does like, maybe works on a project, right? It's a project agent and it's focused on a specific project. Help me with this specific project, and it has like a knowledge, a database that's specific to that.
Mm-hmm.
Or even cooler agents are like these autonomous agents that are monitoring your email, monitoring your team's messages, monitoring different things, and they're automatically taking actions for you. They're like creating documents, sending emails. Or if that's like if that's too much, then instead of them doing it, they'll get everything ready, they'll get the email ready, they'll get the document ready, and then they'll send you a Teams message saying, "Hey boss, I made this for you. You want me to send it?" And you can review it, and if it looks good, you click send, right? So those are like agents. So there's a lot of levels of productivity, personal, agentic. There's even other ones that I can talk about, but this is something that I'm very excited about because not, it's one of those things where not only am I like a user of this product, but I'm also a creator of these types of agents on the channel and whatnot. So I hope that helps.
You did. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
See, that's what I think is beautiful about technology, specifically AI. The big help they give it to us to reduce our time when do we working, right? Now, I have such opinion about AI, but I would like to hear from you. Do you think it, as much we using Copilot, do you think Copilot is going to replace the jobs that professional people have done in the past? Do you think there is a chance that Copilot replace those positions?
Yeah. And I know that question is on everyone's mind. And actually, I have like an audio podcast where I ask the same question of my guests. So I asked them, I said, do you think it's going to replace jobs? Because everyone's thinking about it.
Oh
And
yeah,
yeah, everyone's thinking about it. No, and people like on when I watch CNBC and news channels, like the interviewers asking like the CEOs of these companies, right? Our CEO, NVIDIA CEO, Meta, and so on, right? My my answer is like at least the way I think about it is yes, it is going to impact jobs. Now, in terms of like how much is it going to impact jobs? Like there's like the science fiction movies that you see where like, all the jobs are gone and robots have taken over the world. There's like the kind of extreme, right?
yeah.
And then there's like, yeah, it's gonna affect jobs. What percentage? If there's like millions of jobs out there, is it gonna affect like 5%, 10%, 3%, more, 20%? Who knows, right? And is it gonna be a ramp? Is it gonna be like kind of slowly replacing jobs and it like goes exponential, or is it linear? Like, so I'm sorry, I'm an engineer. I kind of think about it mathematically, all the details of it.
Right.
But to answer your question, just in one word, I would say yes. But then there's like a asterisk and like a caveat, right? Like how much and how long and what kind of jobs. And just recently, because my wife works in education, she sent me a report that Anthropic put together, and they actually created, I think it came out last week, so maybe just search for it. And in that, Anthropic had like a diagram of all these different types of jobs and
Mm-hmm.
which ones are more susceptible by being replaced with AI,
Mm-hmm.
which ones are replaced today and which ones are going to be replaced in the future. And it almost looked like every job is going to get impacted except like manual labor kind of job. So if you're like in construction, if you're doing plumbing, if you're doing electrical work, if you're doing hands-on, if you're a car mechanic, of course,
Mm-hmm.
like how is AI going to replace that
Yeah.
unless we build robots and maybe we build like glasses that can like help you go faster, if you're a mechanic. But um so yeah, the answer is yes, but the devil's in the details in terms of how much and timing and whatnot.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for answer that. I think
Yeah.
it's very big concern globally for most of,
Yeah.
especially those professional in IT industry. They want to
Yeah.
know. But I think some tasks, in my opinion, I don't think the machine can do better than a human being, right? Because our brain operated very differently. And we have the capability to create new things, to create new ways to do and finalize that kind of task, for example. But that's
Mhm.
my personal opinion. I'm not an engineer, but that's what I see uh, about when we are using AI. Now, how Copilot can automate it, uh, we're talking about tasks, right? If I do every task like every day, 2 or 3 times a day, how Copilot can automate that? Is there any way to set up that? Can you talk about that a little bit too?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing, right? Like I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and I really feel like even though it's been 2 or 3 years that AI's come out, we're still at
Mm-hmm.
the beginning of AI. And the reason why I say that, I mean, obviously it's the beginning, it's only been 2 or 3 years, but I also think like there's a long curve in terms of how much this develops over time. And I say that because I remember like when the internet was being formed in the early 2000s, the late 90s, I started
Yeah.
working. My first job was in the year 2000. And back then, like even before, like there were all these different technologies that were competing for to be the dominant player, like I remember there was a product called Netscape, which was like a browser, and Netscape is long gone. No one even remembers that. Now we're using either Edge or we're using Firefox or we're using Safari, but there was something called Netscape, and all these different things were competing. HTML was being formed in terms of like the standard for creating websites. And now you're seeing like MCP, the Model Context Protocol by Anthropic is formed in terms of like how data is talking from one system to another, these connectors for AI. So there's a lot so the way I'm sharing all this because I want to answer your question in that there's a lot of different tools to create automation. So if you're doing something 3 times a day in the Microsoft ecosystem, you can either use something called scheduled prompts, which is the easiest. You just type a prompt into a Copilot chat, and then you schedule that prompt. You say, hey, this thing I do 3 times a day. I want you to run it 3 times a day for the next 3 weeks. And it just does it. Every like X amount of hours or days, it runs that prompt for you, and then it gives you the response in terms of a Copilot chat response. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the simplest way to do it. But that's one tool. We probably have like 10 tools that you can use to do the same thing. And that's where people are confused. They're like, well, Microsoft, what do I do? Do I do a scheduled prompt? Do I use Agent Builder? Do I use Copilot Studio? Do I use VS Code? Do I use GitHub Copilot? And that's just the Microsoft world, right? So if you if you have questions, feel free to ask people like me. We'll be able to help you. But again, it kind of depends on what it is that you're trying to automate. If it's like a simple prompt that you're typing in, scheduling your prompt is probably the easiest. But Depending on what you're doing, you might need to build an agent and use different tools and so on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Interesting.
yeah,
I think is also a questions that people think about it as well, to make easy their job, right? Now, change a little bit the questions from technical part, but more privacy.
mhm.
Let's talk about the bias, right? How Copilot can prevent the bias in AI outputs could be impacted. How Copilot can be prevent those scenarios when the user are choosing to use Copilot, right? What does Microsoft give in terms of protections regarding bias, for example?
Yeah. So there's a concept called RAI, which is like responsible AI, and that is built into the ecosystem of Copilot, where, in terms of like words that are not allowed or, like ideas that are not allowed, all of that is kind of like built into this responsible AI. And in terms of moderation, I know for sure, like when I'm building an agent in Studio, there's a slider from like low to medium to high, so you can make it so that, it's more sensitive or it's less sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of like additional things you can do, again, this is more on like the agent side. You can actually uh, use these large language models and you can update them, and you can kind of train your models so that not only are they, you can feed them kind of whatever you want to feed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And then somebody was telling me, I don't have experience with this, and it's not something Microsoft offers necessarily, but with some companies, you can actually like install your own large language model on your machine. So if you're worried about like sending things to the cloud or using a shared environment, you might be able to like build your own large language model and put it in your own data center in your own machine. And again, this is not something that I have a lot of experience in. Maybe even Microsoft has it, maybe not. I don't know. But I know
Mm-hmm.
that's something that's also becoming an option, which is very interesting because when I started, on-premise systems was a big thing. Everything was on-premise. It was like in companies' data centers, and then there was a huge shift to the cloud. And I wonder if there's at least a partial return to on-premise from it because of the security concerns people have.
Yeah, yeah, true. Now, when do we get connected 3 years ago, I was testing dynamics and we're trying to understand how, because the company was trying that I was used to work for, they were trying to replace their call center, right? That's where we get in touch. Um, speak about AI and Copilot. How you see the beneficial of the companies that choosing use Copilot and AI on their communication with all this social media related, right? It's called the SCO in marketing, for example, and they can have more controlling and more automated tools that can be generate leads also and not missing customers. In your experience that I see when I watch your videos on YouTube, how you see the results um, using Microsoft Copilot and the AI on those scenarios. Can you talk about a little bit that too, that people can get familiar about that?
Yeah, and so you're asking about specifically like call centers and generating leads and creating automation around that, like that
It
type
would
of.
be it would be all of this. If you
Yeah.
could be resume on, but we can focus on account center, for example, how this is going to be applicable when they decide to use
Yeah.
Microsoft.
Yeah, so I think um, this kind of goes back to like the concept of agents and autonomous agents and these automations that you can create and all these kind of tools that we talked about, right? So I mentioned Copilot Studio, which is kind of like there's a spectrum of tools that we have. So on the personal productivity side, you will be using Microsoft 365 Copilot and using things like Agent Builder or scheduled prompts, or there's a workflows agent. So that's all personal stuff, right? But then when you
Mm-hmm.
start moving into like a line of business, you're like, hey, I have a call center and I want to generate leads. I want to create automation for my call center. I want to be able to respond to questions faster if there's open tickets and get back to my customers, all that kind of stuff. And you're
Mm-hmm.
right, Alini, like I used to be in the call center space. So I kind of I remember that very well. But on that line of business side, like some of the tools that you can use is either Copilot Studio or you can use like VS Code and GitHub Copilot or Microsoft Foundry more on the pro code side. And essentially, what you would be doing is you'd be kind of like analyzing all this data, this new data that's coming in, like who's on my website, what are they looking at? Somebody contacted me, what ticket do they have? What existing tickets do they have? What did they buy from me? How
Mm-hmm.
can I upsell with them when they're, on the call? Like this kind of stuff has been around a while, like on the CRM, customer relationship management side,
Mm-hmm.
enterprise data, ERP systems and whatnot. But how do you kind of automate it using AI's intelligence and logic to to do all this stuff for you, like first call resolution, customer retention, all these different metrics that call centers have. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's ways of doing it, and you're basically just building an agent that taps into those systems, whatever your call center platform is, whatever your CRM platform is, whether it's Salesforce or whether it's Oracle, we have connectors that kind of connect to these data centers. And then if you're using like Dynamics, for example, that's another one, obviously. And then that has to tie back into your call center solution, like your phone system and your the way you chat with your customers and you just essentially you're bringing everything together. So you're not really replacing anything. You're not replacing the phone system. You're not replacing the CRM system. You're just supplementing it with this AI solution that has its tentacles into all these systems, and it's using agents to create automation across all of them. So we have to kind of think about ideas of how you could do that, but one simple one is like a chat bot on your website, right? So if someone goes to your website and in the past, maybe you had a chat bot that was static, now your chat bot is dynamic because when a customer is asking it a question about a product, it's going to like a knowledge source. It's looking at questions that were asked before. It's like looking at all this stuff and trying to understand what the gist of the question is of the customer, and then providing links, answering the questions, and maybe even sometimes doing a better job than a human would because the human would have to do all this themselves, like in terms of research, but it's doing it a lot much faster, right? Because it's a computer.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's one way of creating that automation process.
Now, question for you. What does make you decide to open a YouTube channel to teach people globally about not only Microsoft product and service, but I'm kind of curious to know that too because it's a very time consuming beside
Yeah.
of your own work job that you have to also deliver, right? But when I watch your videos, we learn so much in a free way because we don't have to pay anything, right? It's out there. It's different when you go to udemy.com or other platforms that you have to pay for. It's such a huge quality service that you delivered there for us and made me think about it. What it made you decide be doing that as a plus, like beyond and above your job?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that question. Um, yeah, it's funny because in the beginning when I first started, even one Microsoft guy came to me, and this person was in a role at Microsoft that they would deliver these types of contents as paid to customers. And he was kind of like, where'd you get this information from? And like he was kind of like a little bit threatened that like I was talking about stuff and sharing
Yeah.
information freely, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge fan of sharing information freely, especially with AI now. Like information is everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's not, I've never shared anything that is not public. Everything that I share is public information. I think what I do is I basically just kind of connect the dots, right? Like
Uh-huh.
there's so much information, but just like the tools that I mentioned, there's like an overwhelming amount of tools. I'm able to kind of like maybe talk about one concept and talk about the way that I approach it and just show you step by step how to build something, like build an agent, for example.
Yeah.
But in terms of why I did that, it's because of the fact that like I've always seen confusion in the marketplace. It doesn't matter if it's Microsoft or Cisco or what. Like I always just like I've always seen and by the way, like the reason why the channel is called Collaboration Simplified is because when I was at Cisco, I started the channel and I was a collaboration architect. And a collaboration in the Cisco world was like video, phones, call center, all that kind of stuff. So I was like doing these talks with customers. And even then, people were like, what is this? What is that? Right. So I used to have these meetings with customers in a conference room back when we actually went into the office. I would have them in a conference room with 5 or 10 people. And then I started thinking to myself, why should only these 10 people know about what it is that we talk about? If it's all public information, why not share it so that maybe there's somebody else in Brazil or in some other part of the world or even in just my neighbor maybe, and they can learn from it too.
Yeah.
And so I started it at that time just to kind of sh freely share public information and share some of the stuff that I've learned along the way. And then when I moved into Microsoft, I kept doing it with Microsoft Teams and Teams Phone because that's what I came in for. And then the last few years, I moved into this AI role. So now I'm doing it with AI and agents. But honestly, it's all about just sharing information. It does take a ton of time. Um,
It
so
does.
but yeah, it's one of those things that, it's a labor of love, right? Like I've actually come to enjoy it
Uh-huh.
and it's always nice to meet people like you and other people
Thank
that
you.
appreciate it. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the way I see when do we watch your videos, it's the passion for what you do, the terminology and the word that you use to communicate with people globally. It makes it easy to understand. Even that the subject is so hard because it's designed by technical people that has those skills and they have an IT background, right? But the way when you teach and make anybody can understand what you're talking about, that's what we call the democratization of the subject that you're discussing. It makes people understand more clearly and more accessible for those folks as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I was curious to understand. But thank you so much for answer. Um, what is your message, your final message you hear for people can uh, learn from you, from Microsoft and Copilot? Um, what would like to share globally here that people are subscribed on my channel and in your channel as well? Um, can you tell me a little bit more about that too?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like I would leave your audience with just always be curious, right? Always be thirsty for knowledge and always be willing to learn. And that way you can continue to grow. Um, and so some of these kind of terms we actually have at Microsoft, like there's something called growth mindset, and it's it's a learn it all culture, not a know it all culture, right? Like these are some of the things which it's great that we have it on Microsoft, but I don't think that they should be restricted to Microsoft. Every company, every person should kind of think to themselves, like be open, right? Like what is it that I can learn? What is it that I can learn from other people, from or from books, from material, and so now we're at this time when there's so much that's changing. So I think one of them is just be curious and be open so that you can learn. And then the other one is just uh, yeah, I think actually I think that's that's the main one. Just to be curious, just to be curious and to learn. Yeah, I would leave
Yeah,
your audience with that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time here today with me and with all my followers through my all platforms. I do really appreciate it, your time. I know you're very busy, but you took the time to talk to us here today. And hopefully that we can have those conversation again in a different subject and see how AI is going to play out. Like you said, we don't know. It's very unknowing for all of us where it's going to take us, where it's going to drive our business as well. But we are here. We're here to learn and collaborate it, and help each other for all of us can be success.
Thank you, Aline. It was a pleasure talking to you today, and I wish you and your all your audience members and everyone watching the greatest of successes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.